Consumer sentiment picks up in Australia, but it's still very, very weak. JB Hi-Fi records a cracking final 6 months of 2022, and the Chinese economy records its second slowest pace of growth in 50 years. It's Wednesday, the 18th of January, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. I know you're very excited. Our sister podcast is available today.
It is. Wednesday is How Do They Afford That Day? And so every Wednesday there's a new episode out. This is our, as you say, sister podcast that we do with Canna Campbell, the founder of Sugar Mama TV. It's all about making your money work a little bit harder for you. The new episode that is out today is a great one for investors, actually, because it's all about risk profiles and how you figure out what your risk profile is and what that actually means, how it translates into different assets. So it's a really good one for investors, but I will give a quick little mention to some of the episodes that we put out over the last, say, month or so. One highlight in particular for me was the episode a couple of weeks ago on FIRE, the Financial Independence Retire Early movement, which is the big lifestyle trend that's been happening in recent years. And it's been fascinating to hear Canna's take on it. It's a very pragmatic approach to this philosophy of work as hard as you can, invest everything you can, or save everything you can, and then retire early. It's one of our most popular episodes. And I tell you what, how do they afford that in terms of the downloads has been, the technical term is going off its head recently, Sean.
Off its head. What's great about it, it is a great podcast. It's very much a mum and dad retail investor style podcast, and people really are buying into it. And as you said, the numbers for how do they afford that have gone through the roof, going off their head, as you said, technical term. So if you haven't listened to it, just check it out. There's some fantastic chats between Canna and you, Michael, about what I like actually is how much Canna makes you admit your ignorance about budgeting and things like that. I do find that a highlight. But you just learn so much from them.
Oh, well, thank you for that. It was kind of mostly complimentary, a little bit of a whack in there, but I'll take that. How Do They Afford That is out every Wednesday. You find it wherever you're listening to podcasts, but we'll also put a link in today's show notes. Anyway, Sean, on with the show, because we've obviously got our regular program back this week, a little bit shorter than normal. Everything else, though, completely back to normal from next week. But the main story today, Sean, consumer sentiment surged in January by its largest gain in more than 2 years, but the ogre of interest rates means that sentiment is still negative.
The ogre. Don't you love that word?
I do. And it felt like it needed a bit of ogre in the way I said it too.
Yeah, totally. The Westpac Melbourne Institute Consumer Sentiment Index rose 5% to 84.3 in January. That's up from 80.3 in December. Now, Westpac Chief Economist Bill Evans said it's probably because January is the first month since April last year when the RBA, the Reserve Bank, hasn't raised interest rates. The Reserve Bank lifted the cash rate 8 consecutive times since May last year to 3.1%. The central bank's next policy meeting is next month. That's the good news. The bad news is that people think rates will rise again. In fact, Westpac reckons the Reserve Bank will lift rates 2 more times, and that certainly won't help with sentiment. Yep, it jumped a lot this month, but it's still very, very low. Mind you, Michael, the share market doesn't seem too worried about rates. The S&P ASX 200 closed down just a touch yesterday, 2 points in fact, but it's still up 6% since the beginning of the year. That really is a market that's doing well.
And Sean, we talked quite a bit yesterday about the Aussie dollar. What's happening?
Well, the Aussie is off a bit. You're having a go at me normally about wanting the Aussie to go hard when I'm going on holidays, which it has done since I've been on holidays. Anyway, it's off a bit. It's about 69.6 US cents. Gold still high, still above $1,900 US dollars an ounce. Brent crude is up just a touch, but again, as we discussed yesterday, petrol prices, including diesel, Michael, as you pointed out, not too bad at the moment.
And Sean, when we were talking about the Aussie dollar yesterday, you referred to it as the local unit, and I suggested that would be an ideal nickname for me if anybody wanted to use it. Do you know how many people have called me the local unit in the last 24 hours?
If I call you the local unit, Michael, I'm guessing I'm the first.
It would be a grand total of 1. That is correct.
Good. Okay, unit, let's go.
Yes, it's catching on. Sean, the competition watchdog has warned that gas companies that breach the government's price caps face fines of as much as $50 million.
Yes, it's pretty steep. Last year, the government introduced price caps on wholesale energy prices in an effort to reduce very high electricity prices. Yesterday, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission released what it's called its interim compliance and enforcement guidelines for the gas industry. Now, a company that breaches the price caps can be penalised as much as $50 million or 3 times the value of the benefit obtained, whichever is greater. The ACCC boss, Gina Cass-Gottlieb, said the guidelines were designed to help the industry with their obligations. I'm sure a $50 million fine threat will do that somewhat. The watchdog did provide some clarification on the rules, which the gas companies will definitely welcome. The price cap will generally not apply to supply contracts that were entered into before 23 December 2022. So some of that will take a few months to filter through the system, but it may apply if a price provision in an agreement for supply in 2023 is varied. Now, the price cap doesn't apply to sales of gas intended for international exports. That's good news for the local producers. The watchdog said it was open to feedback from producers and users about their commercial negotiations with the price cap in operation.
Sean, some sad news yesterday. Liberal Senator Jim Molan has passed away following a battle with cancer. According to a statement, he died peacefully in the arms of his family.
Yes, tributes flowed immediately. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called Molan a man of principle and a politician of conviction. He lived his life in the service of our country, is what the Prime Minister wrote on social media. Other politicians, including Communications Minister Michelle Rowland, Opposition Foreign Spokesperson Simon Birmingham, and Liberal MP Alex Hawke, among others, expressed their condolences. Now, Major General Andrew James Molan was certainly one of our best. I know, Michael, that you knew some of the members of Senator Molan's family. It's a very sad day. He was a good man.
Yes, a very sad day indeed.
Well, and I'd just also like to mention, it was announced yesterday that Renee Geyer, one of my faves, a great soul singer, also died aged 69 years.
Sean, yesterday we talked quite a bit about Super Retail Group, and today it is JB Hi-Fi that I wanted to talk to you about because the retailer said that it has posted record revenue and expects record earnings for the last 6 months of last year.
Yes, given we've had so many rate rises, 3 percentage points last year, it is quite remarkable how well early signs around spending over Christmas are. People were out buying electronics and appliances with a big boost from Black Friday and Boxing Day promotions in the case of JB Hi-Fi. Now, net profit over the 6 months is expected to come in at around $330 million, which would be a record. This is a very well-run company. It has been for years by its previous CEO and by its current one, Terry Smart. Mr. Smart yesterday said trading conditions had started to normalise following 2 years of COVID disruptions. That's good news. Of course, that follows comments by Super Retail Group, which owns brands like Rebel, BCF and Macpac. They were talking about easing of supply chain issues. Both Supercheap and JB Hi-Fi's share price have jumped sharply in the past couple of days. It just, I think, is quite remarkable for people with mortgages that they are outspending money still, Michael, or as much money as they are.
Now, Sean, yesterday I was actually watching a video on, of all places, I think, TikTok, and it feels like I'm kind of taking this to a new low, describing to you as a reputable source things that I saw on TikTok. But it was looking at a few of the things that JB Hi-Fi does in terms of its marketing and the way that it presents itself and why it is so successful as a retailer. Things like by having handwritten labels in stores and stacked products and concrete floors and giving it a very kind of warehousey feel, that it loses the kind of the big corporate feel and it makes it feel like you are getting a great deal every time you go in there. I thought, isn't that clever?
It is clever, particularly since JB Hi-Fi is really one of the biggest retailers in the country. If you take out Coles and Woolworths, and I'm putting myself on the spot here, I think JB Hi-Fi would have to be close to next in line. I mean, Wesfarmers has Bunnings, so maybe we better put that in front of it. But otherwise, I think JB Hi-Fi is probably the next largest. So it is a massive retailer, but I agree, when you go into a store, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, certainly not. Now, finally, Sean, the Chinese economy, which is obviously all important to Australia, has posted its second worst economic growth performance in 50 years on the back of crippling COVID restrictions.
Yes, the world's second largest economy posted a 3% increase in growth for the 2022 calendar year. Now, for a country used to growth rates of around 7 or 8 or 9%, that's pretty slow. The number was actually better than many economists' forecasts, but growth in the final quarter, the December quarter, was half the level of the September quarter, showing that China ended the year with a whimper thanks to all those COVID restrictions. We really care about this in Australia because China buys raw materials like iron ore and coal for us. China also buys many services from Australia. Think education, tourism, plenty of other things. So a slowdown isn't good for our economy. The figure was the second worst behind the first year of COVID since the Chinese economy opened up in the 1970s. It was well below the official forecast of 5.5%. Another fact that came out of it is that the Chinese population actually went backwards last year. The good news, in an economic sense, if not a health sense, is that the zero COVID policy has been dropped and things are picking up economically. Apart from fewer lockdowns, the Chinese government also looks like it's adopting more pro-business policies, particularly around the critical property sector, and becoming less restrictive in trade terms. We've seen that with the Australian lobster farmers in recent days. The upshot of that is it should be good news for the local economy.
All right, Sean, we don't have an interview today. That is all coming back next week. So the listening for today, the extracurricular listening, if you will, is how do they afford that? There's so many episodes to choose from. The one on risk profiles, which comes out today, the financial independence, retire early one, home loans, paying off your home loan early, the New Year resolutions for your money. Heaps of good listening. You can find How Do They Afford That wherever you listen to podcasts or the link in the show notes as well. Which one are you going to listen to today, Sean?
Fire. Totally.
Great.
Fire. I think that's really interesting.
Oh, it is. And it is the episode that we have received more feedback about than any other one, just because it really kind of gets into that goal that a lot of people have, which is earn as much money as you can and then enjoy the rest of your life. But it comes with some big kind of pitfalls that Canna goes through. So she takes a really pragmatic approach to it. Anyway, thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 18th of January, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.